Yeah, there are quite a few new folks this time. So Ram and myself, we are parenting with depth. There are various initiatives around parenting that we do under this banner. We both have our own jobs, but it's the love for the work, which is how do we bring out the human potential, and earlier the better. So while there are different forms in which both of us
mode. Sorry.
No worries, no worries. Yeah, so there are different areas in which we contribute, whether it's corporate or individuals, leaders. But this is very, very close to Ram and myself. We've been at it for about 4.5 months now. Currently, what we do is morning meditation for parents, which is from 7 to 7:30. And we run Sunday sessions with experts. And so we've been doing this and extremely energized with each and every expert that comes in. Today we'll welcome, without any further ado, and about what we do. Maybe we can get to it later if there is some time. But right now, from the time my child was 6 months, that's the first time that I called Vidya ma'am. She is a Montessorian. Cascade Montessori is what she runs. There is a lot to her, and I don't think my words would suffice. But the only thing that I would like to say is that from that time, very selflessly she's given. My daughter doesn't go to that Montessori because it's a little far, or either ways, for whatever reasons, but she's never ever taken anything from that angle. She gives with her whole heart. She's extremely firm. So she, if there was an imaginary stick, you'd see her in her hand. And I very strongly believe that, Maria Montessori lives in her. So this is a little small brief introduction. As far as the session is concerned, please feel free to ask your questions. Ma'am will take us through the format on how she's planning to do this. But the more interactive, the better. The more you have questions, the easier, so that you could really take away 2-3 things for yourself to be implementing it right after the session is over. So welcome to all of you once again. Happy to have you, and ma'am, happy to host you.
Happy. Shall I start?
Yes, ma'am. Please.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. So good evening, everyone, and it's wonderful to be here. You have taken time off from your regular work and entertainment and your weekend to come and be here. I hope the session is going to benefit you. At least I'm very excited to be here. The idea of tenets of parenting emerged quite a few weeks ago. So when Ram and Shraddha asked me, it just popped up in my head. So I just I've been doing so many courses. I am learning as well as also offering several courses, and it's been a big journey for me. And I'm still traveling. I'm still traveling on that road, and I'm happy to accommodate whoever wants to co-travel with me as a learning parent. So first and foremost, while I try and share my screen in some time, I'd like to just give a certain background to this whole concept of tenets. So I did, a lot of research and work with children. So for several years before I came into Montessori. So today, what I am actually going to be presenting to you is exactly her words. So I will be talking, I'll be commentating on her, the words that she has used for different ages. And so it'll be good for you to also think of how does it apply to your family. My whole idea of parenting, the thought of, empowering all of you is so enriching that you can encapsulate so many years of learning into, today's session. And that's a wonderful thing, because it is very interesting how people learn parenting in different ways. Some of them, learn it on the go. Some of them prepare themselves before they become parents. And by and large, there's a lot of awareness today on how this whole parenting is panning out for everyone. Today we have to admit it's a fast world, and we need quick information, and what information is available, you really want to know whether it is applicable for you, it is whether it is the right thing for your family, and whether you want to use those techniques given there. Many of the techniques given sometimes seem so Western, and it doesn't seem to be fitting your family. So many times we seem to be worried whether I'm doing the right thing. So you all have, we all have our parameters of how we are running our families. I mean, like, there are certain things that we do, and there are certain unique things about how we are planning our family. Now, but then while we say that, there are things that children need. I mean, like, the first and foremost is to understand that we are not here for for ourselves. Once the children enter your lives, that's pretty much about it. You will have to look at how you have to fit your life for the children. So we take up certain things, we understand, we try to corroborate all the little things that our parents have done for us, and we arrive at a formula. But the thing is, there are no role models in this, because today's children are coming with a different set of parameters around them, that it really makes it hard for us to think of the parenting that we were put through. But many a time we have only our parents to look at, or we have some Western ideas that come forth. So both of this don't seem to be helping. Now, the whole idea is to look at the whole the thing in a way that will be useful, helpful, and going to deliver the goods that we need. That's the main part. So while I'm trying to get the screen ready, I want all of you to think of a moment in your time as children. Let's make this interactive. Which has been your most profound moment that affected you, positively and negatively? You don't need to share it, but I want a minute to profoundly think of that time. How you are, responding to that within yourself. Did it leave a very good flavor in your mouth, in your senses? Or did it leave a very bad taste? So these are things that tend to affect you, and the point is to become conscious that these are definitely some inherent belief systems that we carry, and these factors affect our parenting also. So they are not easy to do away with, and they have a certain, weightage in the way that we deal with our children. So while you look at, this 2 points, the positive, the way that things have affected you positively or negatively, I think if we take a moment to contemplate, I would like you to contemplate. I mean, like, Ram and Shraddha have been possibly teaching you some meditation techniques. It is good for you to contemplate for a minute, less than a minute, maybe 30 seconds, on what was a very positive childhood experience for you and what was a very negative childhood experience for you. There is no need to share anything, but it is good to contemplate and just remain in that moment for a period of time, because the most profound one will come to your memory immediately, and you can definitely think that the belief systems are built from those kind of profound experiences. if it is a negative, if it is a positive belief system that has come about, which is very, it gives you a very pleasant feeling, then that's great. But if it's a negative thing, please be conscious of it, because it is something that can affect you. It can affect your family. It can affect your children. Now, what do we do about it? Yes, it's happened in the past, and sometimes we stick on to that blame game position and we don't want to change it. But it is possible to change the minute you get conscious. That's why I'm asking you to contemplate for about 30 seconds. 15 to 20 seconds, let's just remain silent in that moment. Can we do that? I'll just switch off my video. I'd like all of you to just, for about 15 seconds, I'm going to come back in 15 seconds. Okay, so if you're all past that, let's just get on with our session. Now, many of you have very young children, some of you have teenagers, as I see from the chat. So at every stage, what should be something that will help your family is something that I would like to discuss today. Because the whole age range is available, I would like to start from very young ages. In fact, I want you to also delve into, if there are mothers and fathers here, from this situation when the pregnancy was there, when the child was conceived. Was it a conscious conception? Was it a stressful conception? How did the whole pregnancy go about? The whole idea of revisiting that point is important, because we understand that several issues that are bogging the family, it's not just the child, is because of that state. Now, what can we do? We can't do anything, but the point is to attain a certain healing process that those times have had their impact on the child and on you as parents. Now, how do we help the child, given that there was a stress component during the pregnancy? How do we help the child? So that is something that we can think about. So even at that, there are some good points which Dr. Montessori talks about, that the education of child begins at birth. So there is, there are several epics and stories which tell us of how the child in the womb, in the garbha, has such absorbent capacity that it takes all of what is happening around with complete absorption of the sensorial absorption as well as the environmental absorption. So while that is happening at birth, I can only say that we need to be conscious how we are treating the whole pregnancy and the delivery, and not to mention the hospital trauma. So all those are some things that need a separate session of what we are doing as a species. How come we as a species forgot all about what it takes for a human birth. So this is something that we need to think through. So Dr. Montessori says in the first 3 years of life, she says the greatness of human personality begins at the hour of birth. So she talks about the hour of birth. That first hour is extremely crucial. So at the first hour of birth, the child is coming into contact physically with all the humans around. So what do we do at that time? So we need to understand that those are the profound affectation points. So she also says, we used to say that it was the mother who formed the child, for it is she who teaches him to walk, talk, and so on. But none of this is really done by the mother. It is the achievement of the child. What the mother brings forth is the baby, but it is the baby who produces the man. So here there is a certain reverence that she asks us to adopt when we think of children, because it is not easy. It is not easy to think of a child as in a very reverential way, because the child is a small being. The child is a small being and does not have the ability, is almost like a vegetative being. We do not think of the child as someone who deserves that kind of a respect or a reverence. But if you think about it, the greatness of the child comes from the time of birth and into creating himself from the very first hour of his birth. He has learned to adapt to a new environment amidst all the trauma that has happened. So she says how we deal with that moment of birth and later is something that we need to think about. I think I'm able to join in. If you'll admit me, I think I'll be able to share the screen.
Ma'am, actually it's open now. Open to...
Is it open?
Yeah, yes, ma'am.
Okay. So I'm not able to get in. I'll try again. Okay. So the children must, she further goes on to say, children must grow not only in the body, but in the spirit. And the mother longs to follow this mysterious spiritual journey of the beloved one, who tomorrow will be the intelligent, divine creation, the man. Now, so the work of the parent is but to understand that the child is creating himself, is to grow not only in the body by attending to his physical needs. When the great job of being a parent is handed out by the Creator to the parent, we cannot outsource it. It is entirely the responsibility of the parents to look after and help the child become that divine great being that he's born to be. To understand the baby's mind, she says, it is absolutely essential to take the path of observation and discovery. See, this is again my question. How much time, and this is all below 3 years, right from birth up to 3 years, she asks us to observe this baby. How observant are you, and how much do you know about the movements of your baby? How well your baby is adapting to the environment? How is he able to give his parents the communication of what he wants? But he is all the time communicating. When I say he, it doesn't mean that, it is a girl or a boy. It is just that the mother and the father, I'm referring to a generic parent, and the baby as a male gender, just for differentiation. So we are seeing how the baby is developing as a 0 to 3-year-old child. The essence of the human creation is in getting independent. Independent in thought, word and deed, isn't it? We always don't want to have a certain umbilical cord all the time tied to our parents. We want to become independent, and that's the first tenet that we need to think about. This child, the first tenet that we are thinking of is about this independence. And Dr. Montessori says the essence of independence is to be able to do something for oneself. So never help a child with a task. This is actually the second tenet. Never help a child with a task at which he feels he can succeed. Now, this is so important because this is not how we were brought up. We were all brought up to think that we should help. And the help can be in a way that even if the other person doesn't need, it's a show of our affection. We want to show our affection and love for the child by doing everything the child can do for himself. And ultimately, you would have raised a human being who hardly has a coordination between his thought, his eyes, his mind, his body and spirit, who is so disoriented and disconnected from this. So we would have raised such a human being, and we will be feeling sorry for it very soon in time. So how do we educate ourselves in helping the child become independent? So this is something that can be done only by observing your child, whatever age your child is. First is to understand this child has grown up thus far. Whatever age you're thinking. Now, of course, I'm talking of a child who's below 3 years. But as we go by till the 18 years, I will be covering the entire range. So she says, respect all the reasonable forms of activity in which the child engages and try to understand them. Now, that is something that we have to learn, because we do not believe that what activities the child is doing is really worth something. He might be just taking up a cloth and wiping some, table. But we believe that it is unproductive, unworthy work. Why he does it? He wants to do it. And why he wants to do it? Because it is fulfilling some inner need which he has. So so that is very important. So how do we get to engage with this child mentally, on a mental plane as well? Only if we are able to see the worth of what he is doing. If we respect what he is doing, then we will understand, because of our awareness as a parent who understand the the stages of the child, we will definitely know that what he is doing is very appropriate. But if we do not know it, we will just allow it in gay abandon, and the child will be lost in doing something that is not developmentally appropriate. So it's very important for us to also become conscious of the developmental stages of children. So since she goes on to say, to let the child do as he likes, when he has not yet developed any powers of control, is to betray the idea of freedom. Now, this is a very sad thing. Some of the parents who are unable to spend sufficient time just allow that the child does anything, whatever the child wants to do, thinking that that is what the child wants and that is what the freedom is all about. But sadly, the child is actually seeking boundaries. The child is actually testing boundaries. Now, how do we know whether the child is testing boundaries, and how do we help the child to understand what really he needs to do and where he needs to stop? So that is only if we are able to educate ourselves on what the child should be doing. So if a child is taking and tearing a newspaper, we think that he is exploring. Why not? So it's a very thin line, between freedom and understanding true freedom and what we assume as freedom. It's very difficult to communicate to parents across ages. So where sometimes when I confront these points, in a very pleasant way though, I understand that the parents have a feeling that they should give more freedom than what they have, experienced. Now, that is a big question mark, because when they say more freedom, from the point of no freedom to more freedom, there is no line. They go all out. After all, I didn't get that. Why can't my child, get it? I think you're being too strict by saying that, the child shouldn't get this. But the point is, we are providing an environment for the child to develop his character. And in that character development, we must have the bricks, and only he must construct. The bricks available must be the right quality bricks. It cannot be something that is available at random, or him taking and putting something which is not a brick. So we must make sure that, first of all, we know what those bricks are for self-construction, and that we provide the environment for him to self-construct. So she goes on to say that freedom is not absolute for anyone. It is not absolute. We must understand what real freedom is, because it comes with responsibility. And a child, very young child, can take responsibility. We, in our Montessori environments, we give sharp scissors and knives to young children. But the first thing we do is to demonstrate exactly how to use it. Because if we do not demonstrate and just give it, it's irresponsibility. So we will demonstrate for the child the way to handle those sharp objects, because the child wants to. And I don't know if any of you had a chance to see, some time ago, I shared on the social media, a child who was shown a toy and a real object. Even you would experience it with your own children. Whenever you buy a toy, there is a certain euphoria. There's a certain happiness and, wanting to keep the toy, want to possess that toy. But if it is to be traded off with something real, the child would trade it off for something of that sort. And this is exactly what a 1.5-year-old child did. When she was given a spoon and fork versus a doll, she chose the spoon and fork. When she was given, a cloth and versus another, small artificial, toy, she chose the cloth. Everywhere, world over, the third tenet is to believe that children seek reality. Children want reality. Especially below 6 years, there is absolutely no necessity for the fantasy toys and, stuffed dolls and those kind of fairy tales, and those kind of things are not at all needed. Those children, every child below 6 years is much capable of handling real things and needs to handle real things. Now let's move on to children who are between 3 and 6 years of age. Now they've crossed the 3rd year, where there is unconscious absorption of whatever is happening around them. Now they go on to a stage of conscious absorption. So the child who concentrates is immensely happy. A child has learned concentration. Ram, it is not permitting me, it is saying post attendee. So it is showing that it is the conference is not, the link is not working for me.
Ma'am, I'm not sure. Can I email it to your email ID, ma'am? Will that help? Can I again email the link?
Yes, please do. I'll try and get in, because I'm just wanting to share the screen, because these are beautiful words. I'll try to get in once.
Or can you email it to me, ma'am? If I send you my email,
yes,
I can share it on your behalf.
Okay, that'll be great. That'll be great. Yes.
Okay, I'll just message you my email ID, ma'am.
Please don't share it. Send it to cascadefls@gmail.com.
I'll just
share
do that.
the mail ID on that. So a child who is 3 to 6 year old is learning to concentrate, and concentrating on such a deep level that it would surprise us. It would really surprise us to see how a child who is so small, and it has surprised not only any, the social scientist, it has surprised Dr. Montessori herself. That is what is the most interesting part. So she did not expect a child of 3 years or 2 years to concentrate. And that child had such a level of concentration that in spite of the noise going around and in spite of problems of, the children making, her disturbing her going around, nothing seemed to matter. So it just, and this is not only for one child, it was for several hundreds of children that she has come across, and she was happy to be able to record this as a characteristic of a child, the ability to develop concentration. So I think there's something wrong with my internet. So I'm not able to get into the thing.
Okay,
I'll try. I'll keep trying. But
I'll
then,
send you my ID, ma'am.
Yes. I'll try and get that done. Now, the next thing what she says is the human being is a united whole. But this unity has to be built up and formed by active experiences in the real world, as I told you some time ago, to which it is led by laws of nature. Now, let me be, very frank here, that Dr. Montessori is a person that she didn't need to please anybody. She was very forthright in her her convictional talk, that she said that even if you're a child of, she has told very rich people that even if your child, belongs to your family where there are so many people to help around, I can surely say that the child will take to things like a cleaning cloth, a mopping cloth, a dusting pan, a sweeping pan. All that the child will be, interested, naturally. And this actually flabbergasted very big industrialists who actually saw that the children were actually going out to their dais and the helpers and, plucking the broomsticks from them. And it was interesting for them because they never expected it at all. And in fact, they came back to Dr. Montessori and said that you are spoiling our children and they are supposed to be rich landlord's children, and you are making them as though they are some servants and helpers. So then she had to explain to them that this is not about the child. This is not about you. It is about the child, and the child has great powers, and these are the powers, those of reality and those of things that will attract him naturally are what fulfills a human need. And a human need is for cleanliness. There is a human need for food. The children will go naturally and get themselves drawn towards making their own food. They want to cut bananas. They want to cut great carrots. So these beautiful things were some things which there was a possibility of, the families getting to know firsthand from her. And so she says they follow the laws of nature. So there's nothing for us to worry about the child doing things which is inappropriate. The child does beautiful things which the child is cut out to be. There is nothing for us to worry. Now, our care of the child should be governed not by the desire to make him learn things. See, this is very important for us to know. She says this, not by the desire to make him learn things, but by the endeavor always, again repeat, by the endeavor always to keep burning within him that light which is called intelligence. And that's alone possible when they take the route of lifelong learning. So they will not become lifelong learners unless they have got a good taste of learning. And learning can happen only by independence. And the independence of thought, word, deed, and spirit is not something that makes them disconnected from their parents, but it is something that it will make that them respect the parents a lot more. So this is something that she clearly talks about. And just a minute. So this is the age when the children are learning consciously what they should be learning from the environment. They are happily learning. They are not at all, worried about what the others think. And she has a beautiful candid statement where she says, it's impossible to teach a child below 6 years. It can be such a radical statement. Impossible to teach a child below 6 years, but what are the schools doing? That's what becomes a question. So interesting. I have a big presentation on what to look out for a child before you admit him in a school. So I have a big presentation on that, on what really means to a child to be able to go to a school. So she has this statement, and below 6 years, while this is happening, the intelligence is developing, and as the intelligence develops, it becomes a beautiful unfolding of the personality. And when it does, it becomes a point of interest for the parents to watch this child develop so beautifully, so in a calm and peaceful manner. And people think that the child's natural tendency is to be naughty. The child's natural tendency is to be pulling objects and running around and creating a confusion. No, actually not. The child's natural tendency is to actually be a calm observer as a representative of the human species, trying to gauge and understand the purpose of his own birth and trying to find a place in this world. So if you look at a child who is beyond 6, right up to the age of 12, we see how the child opens out into the world as a different being altogether compared to the being that he was before. I'm not able to send the thing. There is some mistake in the my laptop as well as the network. So I'll send it across to you. Possibly you can send it to all the participants later.
Sure, ma'am.
So this child of 6 years opens into the world as with hundreds of questions. What is it? So we start in the Montessori place. We start off with addressing these questions about God, about space, about the universe, about the role of human beings, about the inanimate and animate objects, about senses, about plants. So the whole world we open out to this child, and the child gets a feeling that slowly his questions are getting answered. And it is being done in a way that is developmentally appropriate and giving him the right amount of information, including the story of evolution is given in a beautiful timeline. And the parents are also invited for such a talk, and they understand how the whole learning can be mind-blowing, because it spirals out into a huge array of learning opportunities, both at home and at the learning environment where they go to. So this is very important for the child as well as the parent to collaborate with the learning environment, which sometimes, or rather most of the time, isn't possible when it is a typical school. The school closes the doors completely, and you are left at the gate. So you hardly know, and we all have to wait, including me. I mean, like, I was also a parent whose children went to a regular school, which is why I thought of this radical idea, and it is now thumping success because of the children who are in it as Cascade. Now, the idea of this child who is 6 to 12 years of age is a gatherer. He gathers through his intellect. He gathers a lot of knowledge. Below 6, it is a sensorial development which is happening. He's a sensorial learner. Above 6, he's still sensorially learning, but his intellect has gained leaps and bounds. There is the physical growth has actually slowed down. There is a certain regulated pace in which his body is developing, but his mind is racing, and it is actually looking at everything around. They want to gather all possible things around them. So that is something that is happening for a child who is 6 to 12 years of age. And the greatest tools that they have at this time is the imagination and the reasoning mind. You would be able to talk to the child even complicated things when you are able to simplify the language. You can talk about death. You can talk about birth. You can talk about various things that happen at homes, the sadness, grief. And slowly the child will be able to communicate that he is able to understand and process those kind of heavy information, because he's already having in his intellect these seeds. So you are allowing it to germinate by making open conversations with him. Very clearly, the child doesn't want baby talk, doesn't want to be treated as a baby. He is looking out into the society for heroes. And sadly, our society today is bereft of real heroes. So the only ones who, we can rely on are, in our close circuit of friends, relatives, within family, which is why we want to also emphasize the fact that do not allow the child to be in front of a screen. Ever. So the screen is one of the biggest reasons for all the problems that the children are facing today. In fact, there's a big debate going on about how much of television time. So we are all advocating, child rights educators and, people who are in the field of education. We are saying that the screen is such a big problem for, giving children the education that they need. And today we are stuck with screens. That is a sad thing. The children need social life. They need sensorial experiences. And imagine children who are below 6 years sitting in front of a screen for about 3 to 4 hours and just watching some things. And we find such kind of grief among these children. I have, myself in my own circuit of families and relatives, children have cried, saying that they don't want to be sitting in front of the screen and they're feeling very sad to miss their friends. So, but that is not understood either by the school, or is there a other way out? In fact, today there is a write-up about how parents are trying to form groups and create their own learning spaces, because it is very, very difficult to hold back children and try to just give them what they are, richly deserving on a two-dimensional, not even just a screen, and they don't even get to see what they can actually experience. So a child of 6 to 12 is actually piecing all of this together, piecing all of these experiences together. He wants repeatedly, as I say, he wants to feel a part of the world. He wants to be, happy with, chatting away with his friends. And what do we do in a typical school or in a household? We tell them to sit quietly. They want to express, they want to learn, and they want to process what they have learned, and they want to express. So how much of knowledge that they have gathered, it is just not about facts. Believe me, we really don't believe in just regurgitating facts. We want the children to process the facts. And in fact, every product they create in the school is definitely not question answer based. So if they learn, for example, about dinosaurs, we actually teach them the techniques of creating their own material in terms of possibly a script between two dinosaurs of different ages, or two species of animals during a particular era when they existed. So that gives them a lot of original thought, which is something that as during ancient times, we have had the, greatness of so much of original work, but somehow we haven't been enabled to all of this. That is the sad part of it. So another very important thing is to cultivate a friendly feeling towards error. Now, it is well to cultivate, she says, Dr. Montessori says, to cultivate a friendly feeling towards error, mistakes, to treat it as a companion, inseparable from our lives, as something having a purpose, which it truly has. What a philosophical statement there. She talks about how errors are building blocks of life. We find that today errors are condoned, and the errors which are teachable, which teach the children, they are actually made to feel ashamed about. Then she also talks about imagination. Imagination does not become great until human beings, given the courage and strength, use it to create. Now, this is very important for us to understand, what do children create? Is it useful for the society? Because they continuously have these questions. What I am creating, is it useful for the society or is it not? Is it useful for me or is it not? So for example, there are some children who tend to make some, for example, kind of a contraption which looks like a computer. So I don't say no, I don't deny, that, and I don't shame them, or I don't, probe anything further. I only ask, so what need is this fulfilling for you? So we all have a lesson on human needs and tendencies. So they get to see what human needs are, what needs they have. So it is interesting. While entertainment is a need, so they tell entertainment, auntie. So entertainment is a spiritual need. So how much have you learned on fulfilling your basic needs, and how much time are you spending on entertainment needs versus your physical needs, and how are you fulfilling those needs? These kind of big questions, 7 to 8 year olds will be able to process it. It's amazing. See, the other day I had a series on Mahatma Gandhi. So the 4 tenets of Mahatma Gandhi's talk, beliefs: the Satya, the Swachhata, Swadharma, and Shanti. Such a beautiful 4 concepts. 6-year-olds, 6.5-year-olds, they were awestruck. They asked pertinent questions. So who are these children? We are undermining and underestimating their capacities. 6 to 7-year-olds understanding the Mahatma. So, and why he was called the Mahatma. And I didn't give them some just basic facts that he was born in Porbandar, he did this, he did that. No. So we spoke of the relevance of Mahatma in today's life. We worked on October 2nd. About 6 or 7 children had come. So we also, provide for social distancing and everything. We take all the precautions, but children come in. So that day we had about 10 of them who came in. So we all spread ourselves out. We were watching a documentary on Mahatma, which is, one of our, very well-known resource persons had sent us. So this is such a beautiful thing for us to think that the children are capable of such high thought. And so what are we treating them as? Very, very low level of, some children who can just possibly be sidelined to be occupied with a scribbling pad and some coloring and things like that. They are capable of great thought. And that is how I view my children. I don't expect anything less. My 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds, I treat them like adults in my classroom. Even if there has been a big mishap and there has been a big misunderstanding or a conflict, we still resolve it in a way that is very, very sensitive to the fact that they have their self-preservation dignity that is there. So none of us will ever shame them. Now, people may ask, but they have to face the shaming in the outside world. So when they have the ability of self-respect and dignity, they will be able to face anything that is beyond them, and because they will be able to understand that it is not them. And always that, in fact, interestingly, day before yesterday, we had a discussion on this, that the gates of insult open only from inside. So if somebody is insulting you, you don't have to buckle, you don't have to go crumbling. And this was with my 9, 10 and 11-year-olds. And it is such a beautiful topic that, I saw wonder in their eyes when we discussed this. And this just didn't come up as a lesson or anything. It was a part of some story that I was reading out to them in Tamil. So yeah, going on to the next part, the last part of our conversation here on the 12 to 18. Many of you have teenagers, as I see. The adolescent must never be treated as a child. Now, this adolescent is a 12, 13, 14-year-old. So she says this, the adolescent must never be treated as a child, for that is a stage of life that he has surpassed. It is better to treat an adolescent as if he had greater value than he actually shows, than as if he had less, and let him feel that his merits and self-respect are disregarded. So it is better to treat him with greater expectations, even if he is just rising in the terms of productive as well as a responsible living. But we treat him with that dignity. He is poised for that image. He readies himself and primes himself for that image, that we see him as a worthy person of respect, rather than putting him down and treating him with lesser regard. So this is a very important tenet which he speaks about the 12 to 18-year-olds. I'm sorry I have not been able to share the screen, but you will all receive a the copy of this tenets presentation which I've made. So the last thing which she says on the 12 to 18 years, I will close with this slide, and I will be happy to field questions. The essential reform in this whole education as well as parenting is this: to put the adolescent on the road to achieving economic independence. We might call it a school of experience in the elements of social life. Now, we are discussing the home also as a school, because we cannot shy away from the fact that learning happens 24/7. The child is, or rather 18 hours and then 6 hours when the child is sleeping, the child is processing that information and sleep as well. So during the 18 hours, where only about 5 to 6 hours he's in a school, he is also learning at home. So I would think that the elements of social life is something that the parent needs to ready him for at home as well. So unless we learn how to treat the adolescent with the respect, teenagers will continue to be troublemakers and deviant children, sadly only because they have never been valued, not because they are inherently that way at all. And I have such wonderful teenagers in my class, and they all, they have actually surpassed, they've all not come from a Montessori background. They've come from other backgrounds as well. And they've come because some of the parents have told me that, I don't know how to deal with him. He has so much of anger within him. He is so, he talks back so badly and he cries at the first instance. So there are tsunamis happening within. There are volcanoes happening within, earthquakes happening within. So how do we respect this little, youth who is growing up? He himself is fighting his identity. So she says, as a last parting shot, if I may say so, she says these words: therefore, work on the land is an introduction to both to nature and to civilization, and gives a limitless field for scientific and historic studies. If the produce can be used commercially, this brings in the fundamental mechanism of the society, that of production and exchange, on which economic life is based. So she talks of 12 to 18-year-olds learning in a farm school with nature as a part of real life, real time learning. And that is so crucial, because in our place we are still not yet at the farm. We are still developing the farm, but I have a big huge terrace garden, and I have about 250 plants there, and many of them are vegetable crops, and we have cooking sessions with them based on the crops that they harvest. And they have also learned to sell it and record the money. So it's very interesting to see how they feel so responsible for these and they want to be a productive part of it. So the children who haven't bothered about mathematics, who haven't bothered about language are now avidly coming forward to actually write down accounts, write down, you know, the recipes of the cooking sessions. They're willingly writing down the manual for taking care of the plants and organic manure. How do you produce it? So they're writing down all of those. And it is amazing how she didn't do very much work with adolescents, but she actually foresaw these because of her various interactions over time with young adolescents who showed the propensity towards these kinds of work. And she saw the resultants of such work on the character of the adolescent. So she goes on to say, this means that there is an opportunity to learn both academically and through actual experience what are the elements of social life. We have called these children as Erdkinder, Earth's children. It's actually, so she had a chance to name this when she was in Germany. So she named it after a German name as Erdkinder. And it's interesting that, you know, I'm doing the course now, the Erdkinder course, and it's mind blowing. I'll put this off the record that, you know, some days anyone who's interested in to know more about it can get in touch with me. It's a, 10-week course, adolescent orientation of completing the education the Montessori way up to +2. So because they are learning about civilization through its origin in agriculture, they are called land children. So the children who work on the land have shown phenomenal character, and they have shown such responsibility towards the earth as stewards of Mother Earth, as she calls them, the global citizens who are stewards of Mother Earth. So with this, I will close my presentation, and I think we are just on time for taking questions. I'll be happy to take questions from you. If there are anything else that, you know, you'd like to me to add on as we go on, please feel free to put it up in the chat box or unmute yourself and say as per the organizer's wish. Thank you very much. I hope it was a good session for you. For me, it was as all of the time an enriching experience, because when I repeat these words over and over, it also layers for me as a parent and as an educator. So this is something that I wanted to share. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Vidya ma'am. It's like, we can be with you every day, and keep learning, every minute, every day, and keep learning, for, our whole lifetime. So thank you so much. I mean, this is
Thank you.
very, very helpful. Just request parents who have questions to either unmute themselves and ask, or they can put it in the chat box and Shraddha or I can just ask to Vidya.
If parents don't take the opportunity, we are going to take for sure.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Ma'am, this Montessori is only applicable for the normal, so-called normal children, or it's applicable for special needs also?
It's applicable for children. So there is nothing called special needs or anything, because in our training itself, we are taught to deal with the issues, not as issues, but as something that the children come with, the special powers that the children come with. Yes.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Ma'am, there's a question from Divya. What books can we read to know the basics of Montessori?
Okay, so there is, of course, the online, there is a lot that is available, but there are books written by her. I mean, like, I would definitely say, depending, on where you are, if you are in Chennai, I can suggest where you can get these books. And the Absorbent Mind, what you should see, I will definitely ask you to start off with what you should know about your child. That is one, and Child in the Family, both by Dr. Montessori. Yes. So both by Dr. Montessori, and it is available with a number of, with Kalakshetra publications, as well as a couple of other publications. You can definitely get those books and read it. you can get in touch with me if you would like to have, because we are actually getting these for our parents, because at Cascade, all parents need to have a big set of books. Their children come walk in without any books, but the parents will be taking home a big bunch of books for them to study. So, yeah.
Ma'am, second part of Divya's question is, for children who are attending Montessori school, how will the transition from Montessori to other boards be?
Okay, so the children, so this is something that, you know, many of the parents ask me. There is so much that the children in Montessori, authentic Montessori classrooms will be learning, that sometimes it might turn out to be a damp squib to put them through other regular mundane schools. So they'll get bored. I have had instances where children have felt bored. But because if they have, you know, gotten the full benefit of the Montessori environment that they have been in, they will definitely be able to cakewalk any other board or anything like that. But I can only caution you is that they will do studies only as part-time. They will look at many other things, like textbook based is only one, so say about 1/10 of what they will be doing. They will not like to learn from textbooks. So the important thing is to provide them with a lot of additional opportunities and experiences, which is very, very important. Like for a 6 to 12-year-old, there are two classrooms. One is the classroom within the environment, and the other is the world. So Dr. Montessori says 50% of the time the child should be learning from the outside classroom, and only 50% of the time the child has to be inside. So you can imagine how much the child would be learning. Every person they come across can be teaching them something. So they should be, the parents should be open to give that time and space for the child.
And there's a question that came up during registration for this session.
Yes.
Some guidance on how to draw the line between a child's inner need and just a whim.
Just a whim. Okay, yeah. So, but then I will put you back to the first few slides, first few conversations I had on observation. You have to observe the child. Why is the child wanting to do something? Is it a whim? It will not last long. So allow the child to delve deeper, and if it is that the child is staying there in that zone longer, you will have to educate yourself on whether this is a developmentally appropriate thing. So in fact, recently I had an instance where a parent purchased a very, a guitar for a boy. Now, the child showed an inclination for learning. He was strumming. But strumming, and he was actually patiently waiting. He was asking his parent. But my take on it was, you know, you don't just like that buy an instrument and give. The point is that many of the children think it is way too easy to get these things. It is, and the means are so much that, you know, today we have the money. I mean, like, let's face it, you know, all this global pandemic, economic crisis, whatever, there is still money floating around for buying those extra things, for ordering Swiggy. You know, we do have this extra monies available. So what are we doing with it? How do we, what is a, you know, what is the taste of, you know, true, responsible decision that the child is allowed to take? So for that, we need to observe, right through, right from birth till 18 years, we are asked to observe, because when you observe, you will get to know this. So I can see some other questions. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'll just read it for you, ma'am. So, question from Vasudha: how to help a child who has lost interest or confidence in particular subjects? She's saying her son tries to run away from Hindi, 7-year-old. Does external motivation work like reward? How to develop inner motivation for learning?
Okay, so external motivation is something that the children don't really need, If they are seeking external motivation, please be assured that it will not be long lasting. Your external motivation techniques will have to keep spiking. From stars, it will have to become chocolates, and then it will have to become something else, something else, something else. The graph will just keep rising. It just won't work. So my thing is, if it is possible, you have to understand that the child doesn't feel the need to learn. How do you create the need to learn? How do you create that interest? Do you have that interest, first of all? Are you a Hindi speaking family? If not, you learn parallelly along with the child with the same interest as you would like to see in the child. That is something that will be, because we cannot keep pointing fingers and saying, you learn, you learn, you learn, especially when it is not a natural thing, when the child, or possibly that the child has had negative experiences. I have had many children walk away from mathematics. So we have had to have sessions with parents where they show the value of daily life math to children. So that is something that we, it will help. So, so intrinsic motivation is something that cannot be injected. It has to be, all the negative scaffolding has to be removed. All the external installation has to be removed, and the child must be able to be in his elements to experience the true nature of what is magnetically pulling him towards a particular work. The child might be drawn to nature. So children by nature are not lazy. They are children, all children by nature are learners. So if there is something that is preventing them, please find out what is preventing. Because the session is not adequate for me to explain the human tendencies and what it takes for a child to really experience true learning, especially when there is so much of distractions and negative pulling happening. So that is something that we need to examine. We cannot wipe that away, because today the screen is the biggest puller, and it's the biggest babysitter today. So we must understand that this has caused havoc. I will use the word havoc because I am seeing now, the last 30 years now I'm working with children. I'm seeing how it has wrecked the life of several families. It has wrecked it. And people don't realize it. They think that it is okay. And this is a technological world. They should, expose their child to computers. Please do your studies before, forming these kind of opinions. Very well-read philosophers, educational philosophers. So first of all, which educational philosophy are you following? So these are the things that we need to question ourselves. Before we ask anything, we must find out what is our belief system. Do we believe that our child has it in him? And if so, how are we helping to help him? How are we helping to unravel it? So it has been, surrounded or rather insulated. So how do we help him to uninsulate himself and actually emerge towards blossoming? How do we help him? So that is something that we have to find out. So language, mathematics, English, history, children will run away from. Because if they do not have teachers who will be gripping them with interest, that is not extrinsic, but that is very intrinsic, that is magnetic. Stories are something that will capture their imagination. See, children today, I've had children who are 16, 17, 19 who come and tell me, Auntie, can you tell us stories? So stories are the way to capture children's imagination. And so what stories are those teachers telling? What stories? If they are not telling stories, children won't go to them. So we must think through a lot on these matters.
There's a question from Prakul.
Yes.
How do we differentiate between providing freedom to children and providing bricks for self-construction?
So providing bricks for so the thing is to understand those are developmental stages for children, and at every stage it's very important for us to know. In fact, all schools must educate parents on two things. One is what is developmentally appropriate for the parents to do at home. Second, on what are the developmental stages for children at every age that they need to help. So this is very important for the parents to understand, and many of the schools don't seem to provide it. So you must ask for, so what is the educational philosophy? So the second part is on the educational philosophy. When you read deeper into Dr. Montessori's works, this will emerge, and this doesn't need to be taught. You will get that instinct. Those windows will pop up. The light will burn in your mind. Wow, this is how it is. So this is what my child is doing. So I must be clear on not putting more obstacles. So Dr. Montessori says, you first must understand your role, that you need to remove the obstacles in the child's path. That's your job. You're not one omnipotent great person. So that is in contradiction to, you know, what we believe. You know, we have a Guru Sishya Parampara, but the Guru Sishya Parampara is applicable only after a particular stage. Till then, the child is self-constructing, come what may. So you must understand that you don't have any negative bricks there that the child is picking up from. So that's what it is.
Yes, thank you. There's a question from Divya. Have there been any studies that happen to children who have a Montessori start and then go on to other types of school? And what's the motivate? Okay, that's the second part of the question. But
studies are there. So the, you know, Angeline Lillard, she's a famous psychologist. She has studied this, and she's continuing to study, and she's showing how you can look up her research work. Even in India, you know, there is a lot of research that is happening now on how children are succeeding. You have famous names of Google brothers and, you know, Wikipedia, and so many people, Annie Frank, and many people who have, you know, Montessori experiences early in their childhood, and then later on they have moved on to other schools, and they have done pretty well, and they have done pretty well in life as well. So there are many studies, and it is catching up wildly all over the world right now. The revolution is coming back on because right now it is a point of reflecting on what mass schooling is all about. So they say weapons of mass destruction, they say weapons of mass instruction. So we are ready for neither. We don't want either. So each child is unique, and the beauty of this it's not even a method. So she says it's a philosophy of the child. It follows a path of the child, and that is a natural path. So we all can believe that the children want to learn, and they are continuously learning every moment of their life. So how do we enable it? So that is pretty much what it is.
And you spoke about screens and the effects screens have, and there are at least 8 to 9 questions while registration itself where people are asking guidance and advice on how to wean away children from screen. And so if you could...
Oh, it's a huge topic.
Yeah.
It requires another session, because we have successfully weaned out. All our 35 children are away from screens.
Great.
They do not go anywhere close to screens, and that's a prerequisite for admission to Cascade as well. So if they've come with a screen experience, we will addict them from the screen, and then only actually take them in. And it's an easy, sweet process. There is nothing, it's not rocket science. So children seek reality. So how much of reality are you able to provide? The TV is doing its job. I'll just give you this one tip. The TV is doing its fantastic job. The media, the screen, everything is doing its fantastic. What are you doing about it? Children like just the screen with 2 dimensions, or they like 3 dimensions. So I tell parents, plan and, you know, have a drama party at home. You have a singing kacheri at home. So this is something that, you know, the children would love to be a part of. Have a, you know, potluck at home. Make the children cook. So the 3-dimensional sensorial experiences is something that they will be drawn to, and they'll get addicted from it. And in fact, if the television is on in the hall also, they won't even look at it. this is the thing that, you know, parents have told me. I'm shocked. I've had parents who have almost thought, is this even true? It is true, because I am not a superior person in telling all this. This is the nature of the child. To drop something that is unnatural, it is natural to children. They will drop it. They will not want it anymore. If you provide 10 pots of plants, if you provide and ask them to look after it, or make them grow plants every day, composting the waste at home, you must see the way they just go all over the place and see that your place is spick and span clean, and they will make sure that their plants get, you know, adequately enough manure and water, and they look after it so well. They spend hours looking at it, but we don't give them such opportunities. So that is the sad part.
And there are a set of questions around conflicts, like for example, conflict between home and school environment, conflicts between, let's say, the parents themselves as to the methodologies they adopt, and conflicts between, let's say, parents and what grandparents are saying. So there are questions around how to handle such situations.
Okay, whenever there is a conflict, the point is not to react. The point is to understand the root of the conflict. So proactively try to address it. So if there is a conflict between the parents, the grandparents, it is important for us to respect that the grandparents have had some experience in life. Possibly something has worked for them. And for us to actually respectfully tell them that these things we are trying out as an experiment. We will come back to you if there is something less known. But we are seeing that we want to take ancient wisdom, which seems to be the way to go forward. Ancient wisdom has always been pro-human. It has not been anti-human. But today's ways of the television, fast money, fast food, fast media are all anti-human and anti-nature. So the point is to, first of all, go back to your basic existential questions on why are we doing something what we are doing, so that we are in a position to help the grandparents look at it in a right way, fully being conscious and aware that they are respected when we give them a different opinion. So we have to respectfully deal with it. Now, between the school and the home, if there is a iron wall, you know, there won't even be a conflict. There will be only lack of information. So in lack of information is not conflict. So the point is to go through that iron wall and ask them. That's what it is. And if they are not giving the right answers, you know what to do. To empower yourself to become, you know, a set of parents who are conscious and aware of how to educate their children, I think you should go all out for it. Because today the answer is not in finding fault and trying to change others, but trying to empower ourselves and seeing what best we can do with the resources that we have. That's it.
There are a set of
Ma'am,
questions. Yeah,
just a second. Ma'am, if you don't mind, I'd like to add, I mean, there were so many times that I resonated and wanted to add, but this is like, I'm not able to stop the urge now. And I know you'll understand when I say that there is an urge from within. So in Buddhist philosophy, you know, when there are certain obstacles, so there is one particular part which talks about obstacles and devils. And it says that obstacles come from outside, devils are within, and there are some functions, and I wouldn't go into that right now. But the only thing that they say is that whenever there is an obstacle, now why I'm bringing this in is because the question is about the conflict between home, grandparents, what parents need for their children, what children want for themselves, the environment that they get from other children they play with, because then, you know, there's like a confluence, because there is one family, there's another family, the children are coming together, two beliefs are getting mixed, so we're always going to be at this point, right?
Yes.
So in the Buddhist philosophy, it says that whether there's an obstacle or a devil, go within, figure out what is the trigger and work on the trigger and move on. I think as parents, the way I've taken it is, if she comes and talks about something which is contradictory to what's happening in our house, from whether the school or the playground, we sit and have a conversation. She's 4.5, but she's very open to conversations. The moment I try and talk the language that she would understand, but the moment we have the conversation, it actually opens up to what she wants within this. And what is the
Yes.
point for her to, so, this brings back all the things that you said today, keen observation, the urge, the obstacle, it kind of, and therefore these dialogues have so much power. They're very
Yes.
small. It'll take very less time. So parents think that, how do I explain such a big thing? But it's basically in these small moments that it comes across, and you
Totally.
save time for a lifetime. You're saving your time while you're
So many,
putting in.
because you have actually, you have imparted lasting impression for this child.
Yeah.
And that's something that the child will remember forever.
Yeah.
So this is very important from our side to spend that kind of time with the child and understand that across ages 0 to 18, do not give the help to the child that the child is capable of doing by himself. Now, how much he is capable of doing by himself is something that we need to educate ourselves about. That is what it is. So we cannot but, realize that how little we know. We have to understand and know what it takes for a child. So in fact, today morning, as a part of my course, I have a lecture called Moral and Social Discipline. Okay. And one of the lessons, one of the lines say, children in an environment, they will never help another child if the child is doing something that he can actually accomplish. But the adult will feel how rude of the other children not to help. And she says, all this comes out of your mind's training to believe those children and the child who doesn't need help. But you will also, when you're observing, get to see that the minute something goes wrong, all of them will drop everything and come and help him. That is the beauty of the wise children that they are. They are very tall human beings. We really underestimate and undermine their abilities. They know what help they need and they will ask if they can't. But if they are continuously asking for help on things that they can do, it is a red flag that you need to address. And it cannot be by just talking, saying that you can do it yourself. Why are you asking me? No, please don't talk. Children below 6 don't learn by verbal advice at all. They want role modeling, they want gestures, they want action. So that is what it is. Not too much words, because words actually matter for the 6 pluses. If you say 2 sentences, they will give you 6 sentences. How? They can actually befuddle you with their reasoning mind and imagination. Now you will have to equip yourself on how to handle that. So their sense of wit will, amaze you. And sarcasm, so suddenly you will find, where is this child? I actually thought I knew. He's changed. So that is an interesting part that we need to think about. So yeah, please, I think we should go ahead with the questions.
Yeah, sure, ma'am. There are, I'm conscious we are very close to 5:30, but a couple of questions. First one is, a lot of people are asking if you will do more sessions for us because they feel that we haven't, been
scratch
able to
the surface. Yeah. Imagine asking me to talk between 0 and 18 years in 1 hour. Imagine. I'm doing a course. Each of these courses are 2 years, 2.5 years, and I took so much of trouble to. If you ask me to speak for 2 hours, 3 hours, it's fine. But to constrict it to 1 hour is a huge issue. It's not easy. Yeah. But yes, as the time goes by and as the things come up, I'll be happy to. I'm just sharing the PowerPoint. Possibly you can post it in the chat so that they can all download it.
Yeah, I'll send it to all of them. Yeah.
Yes, so so that they can take a look at it at their leisure time and then go for more explanation and exploration which they need. Yeah. So any other questions? I think we are almost at the time of
maybe one last question, ma'am, with your permission.
Sure, please.
So there's a
please.
question
Oh,
from
yes.
Suchi here. Your thoughts on the difference between external discipline and learning to set limits and providing appropriate freedom to children?
Where is this appropriate? I'm not
Just
able
like
to.
if you are 3 or 4 above the last one, like from Suchi, I'll just post it again, ma'am.
Okay, Suchi, yeah, your thoughts on the difference between external discipline, okay, and learning to set limits and providing appropriate freedom. Okay, fine. So, this is again something that calls for a lot of caution. You know, we cannot just like that, randomly say things. Especially, children can sense if you are speaking with the right knowledge or you are whimsical. The children can sense it. So that is the uncanny thing about children we have to be very conscious about. So if you are setting limits, don't make the limits flexible. If the child is above 6 years, co-opt him into the limit setting paradigm. Make him a part of the decision making. So what limits are you setting? And how are you setting those limits? Is it just a diktat at home? Or is it a process of making people understand? And is everybody following it? So this is something that we need to know. And freedom is something that, so there is Dr. Silvana Montanaro and, her group of people who talk about Sylvia Dubovoy, Dr. Sylvia Dubovoy. If you Google her, you can see a lot about her. She's a person who speaks a lot about freedom and discipline. For children below 3 years, imagine. So what are we talking about? So she says, if by chance you think that you have given freedom too much, you must have thought about it before giving that freedom. Because once you give that freedom, you cannot take it back. It is not at all possible to take back the amount of freedom that you have given because you have already sanctioned that much of freedom. So freedom is like, making a rope. You know how the coir makes a rope? Like the rope, you keep adding more freedom when the will is developing with responsibility. I double, emphasize the development of the will because will is the one that helps the child to create the right decisions in the mind. If the child is not able to decide responsibly, the freedom has to be limited, whatever age. So if the child is below, so right from 3rd year, below 3 years itself, we must show that with a rising responsibility, the freedom will increase. So it is something that we need to learn before we practice it on our children. So it is important for us to learn the 2 sides of the coin, which is one side is freedom, the other side is responsibility. You must be able to see that freedom is given as much as the child can handle. That's it. If the child cannot handle more freedom, don't give. You have to be the boss at home. You are not a tyrant, but you are a reasonable boss. You have to set limits and stick to it. The child must see the firmness and the conviction in which you operate those limits. Freedom comes with responsibility. If they are going into the kitchen, like a 10-year-old goes into the kitchen and says that, yes, I'd like to cook today, great. But you have a responsibility of cleaning up after. If you don't know how to clean up after and you say that I don't want to clean up after, you will not enter my kitchen. So this is for a 10-year-old. So like that, extrapolation, interpolation on both ends, it works right up to 18 years. Once they finish and they have the freedom to, so till then they do not get absolute freedom. So this is something that we need to learn, right? Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much, ma'am. Heartfelt gratitude. We would just love to keep hearing you, but then we conscious of time.
Well,
thank you.
I've shared my PowerPoint to you, Ram. So
Sure,
you can possibly, those whoever are interested, you can put it up on the chat box itself. They can download it if it's possible, or you can send it to them over mail.
Sure, ma'am. I have all of the contact details. So we will send it.
Yes.
We'll share it with them.
Sure.
We'll do that now.
I'm happy that to have spent the time with you, and I'm glad to have met so many parents. And I really wish and hope that what we spoke was useful for all of you. And you will get continuously questions. So please do have questions in your mind. You will get the answers some way, either from me or from anyone else.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And
The session was
unless there is
very, very useful. Actually, you can see the chat actually buzzing, you know, with a lot of thank yous. So that really shows how, people have really learned and benefited from the session.
glad. I'm very glad. I'm very glad.
Very, very thankful to you and heartfelt gratitude to you for
Sure.
readily accepting.
All the best. Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you also to all the parents, and we have lined up 3 or 4 other sessions for the rest of the Sundays of this month as well. Next week we have a session by Manoj Pavitran from Auroville. Again, a very, very learned person.
Yes, I can vouch for him. Absolutely. I've heard him before. Yes.
Manoj is like awesome. So we'll share all the details with you. We've also lined up further sessions. So kindly, do attend the rest of the Sunday sessions as well. Looking forward to seeing everyone. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Bye-bye. Thanks a lot. Bye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye. Thanks.